Alrighty, so this is Sunday morning, June the 7th, 2020. There's a tropical storm, a crystal ball, not, crystal ball, but Cristobal, currently tracking north through the Gulf of Mexico. This is a very interesting not hurricane, it's still a tropical storm, and I don't think it'll achieve hurricane status. Because it's making landfall in Louisiana as I record this, and things like this, they tend to lose energy as they pass over land, because all tropical storms, cyclones, hurricanes, get their energy from the ocean, and which is a huge big battery for energy, and has been warming even faster than land, thanks to our use of fossil fuels. Anyway, the interesting thing about this particular tropical storm is it started off the coast of Mexico, and actually even south of Mexico, kind of off the coast of Guatemala and Central America. Thinking back, about 10 days or so ago. And this is the first time I've ever seen a storm cell actually hop over Central America from the Pacific into the Gulf of Mexico. Even huge, big, massive hurricanes, once they hit land, they get destabilized, they lose energy, they're not being fed energy by water anymore, and they peter out, and they quickly kind of collapse from like a Category 5 down to a tropical storm, and then just but this puppy, and all of the models 10 days ago said this was going to happen, had something in it that meteorologists and climatologists are now scratching their heads over. It had something, just the structure in it, or a weird combination of circumstances. This is a low El Nino year, so that part of the ocean wasn't really energized. It's really weird. Anyway, it literally transitioned across Central America and is now in the Gulf of Mexico, formed into this tropical storm, and is now pounding the shit out of Louisiana. And actually, it's the models are still saying, what the fuck? Because they're expecting this thing is going to maintain tropical storm status as it kind of runs straight north through the U.S. and 3 or 4 days from now is going to impact Manitoba, Canada, and in fact it'll be at its lowest central pressure, and that's kind of one of the ways they measure the intensity of storms like this. It's a weather cell, and there's low pressure in the middle, high pressure outside, just basic thermodynamics, basic university thermodynamics, to be honest. But anyways, it's gonna hit Manitoba, and I've never seen that either. I've never seen a hurricane, a cyclone as they call them in the Pacific, jump over Central America into the Gulf of Mexico, maintain its intensity, because right now the Gulf of Mexico is not as warm outside its average, so it's this thing is getting its energy source from somewhere. But anyways, right now the Gulf of Mexico is relatively normal. What we saw the last couple of years is the hurricanes that we get from Africa. That's where they originate. It's been really warm, and of course it still is really warm. Global warming, thermodynamics, that's how it works. So there's been tons of energy in the lower part of the Atlantic, which has fed these storms, and they've turned into these monsters. And 2 to 3 high intensity hurricanes forming simultaneously is like the ultimate real world horror movie, for me anyway, as a armchair meteorologist, climatologist. But anyway, one of the things about this hurricane is it's formed in the same position in the Pacific, or near the same location, that 5 years ago a massive hurricane called Patricia formed. This was 2015, and it was September, October, and I clearly remember it. It was it popped up onto the radar of hurricane cyclone geeks like me I think it was a Thursday, and then I watched it, and I just watched this thing just turn into this huge storm in like 18, 19 hours. I'd never seen that before. And it's now become a recognized phenomenon in the world of meteorology and climatology. It's called rapid intensification. And this is where a storm, like a really kind of crappy windy storm that's giving like 50-mile-per-hour winds or something like that, suddenly just morphs into this killer. And Patricia was the most intense hurricane in humans recorded period. This is advanced meteorology, which really has only existed for less than 200 years. And of course, it's really become top notch over the past 40 years as we've been able to, position satellites to look down on Earth and figure out what the heck's going on. But anyways, the interesting thing about Patricia is that it was classified, it went from a tropical storm intensity all the way up to a Category 5. And the way humans measure, or not measure, but how humans classify the intensity of hurricanes is something called the Saffir Simpson scale. Now, the Saffir Simpson scale was named after the two guys that invented it. This was back in 1971. A civil engineer by the name of Herbert Saffir and a meteorologist by the name of Robert Simpson came up with this scale. And basically, the reason behind their scale is they wanted to create something that civil defense preparedness people could use. In other words, okay, how bad is it going to be? Well, it's going to be a tropical storm, so make sure everybody battens their hatches down and gets ready for a couple hours of no power. All the way from it's going to knock the shit out of a big part of wherever it lands, Category 5. And when you get into it, Category 5 is a monster. And each year, on average, there's 2 or 3 of these massive Category 5 storms. And the statistics are just unbelievable on these things. They'll have sustained winds of like over 250 kilometers per hour, which is unbelievable. It's like that's like Mach 0.3. So shit is flying past you as fast as a airline as it takes off and gets to cruising altitude. Crazy. But the ironic, and what I discovered as I got dug into it, the kind of funny part about the Saffir Simpson scale is it stops. It says, okay, Category 5 is the worst. And the reason Category 5 is the worst is that human built structures, except for like bunkers and rocket launch pads, etc., if hit by a Category 5 hurricane, are just obliterated, including, of course, the people, the trees, the animals, the cats, and all that sort of stuff that's in that area of devastation. So the idea that a civil engineer and a meteorologist, Saffir and Simpson, put this scale together to kind of give civil defense people a understanding of what they're going to have to do after this thing hits. And they classified them as Category 5 is the worst, which basically means National Guard, bring in all sorts of stuff, because wherever it hits is going to be incredibly devastating, and it will take years, if not decades, for that spot to recover from the effect of the hurricane. But this is the way I look at it. This whole Saffir Simpson scale is just a human construct, like I said, created by a civil engineer and a meteorologist. And their definition of absolute worst is all the buildings are gone and lots of people are dead, which is, of course, horrible. But Mother Nature is not constrained by suddenly not, getting worse than a Category 5. It's like, Mother Nature says, well, here, hold my beer. Let me show you what I mean. So if you look into the Saffir Simpson scale, you can also plot it based on things like rapid intensification, but in particular, the atmospheric pressure at the eye of the hurricane. The more intense hurricanes will have atmospheric pressures down to the 970 to 950 millibars. And that's huge. Like here in Vancouver, I have a little gizmo I built out of electronic components to track temperature, humidity, as well as air pressure. And this thing just cycles between like 998 and 1001 all year long. The Pacific coast is beautiful because we don't get super intense storms, except once every a while we'll get a typhoon. But anyways, if you look at Patricia and how it evolved, and take a look at its central air pressure when it was at its peak, and prior to that, which is what I did, you kind of look and you say a category 1, category 2, category 3, category 4, category 5, what were the central air pressures, and you basically can plot this curve, and it's kind of goofy looking, but it has a distinct pattern. And then you can do some simple statistical analysis and say, okay, where was Patricia at its peak on this scale, based on atmospheric pressure and the speed of intensification of it? And as it turns out, if you extend the category or the Saffir Simpson scale, Patricia was about an 8.8 to an 8.9, category 8.8, 8.9. It just came super close to being a category 9 hurricane. Now, if you tell this to a meteorologist, they'll of course say you're absolutely insane, there's no such thing. But like I said, Mother Nature, hey, hold my beer, watch this. So anyway, that was just kind of a funny little anecdote about what's happening right now. We humans think by defining, like boxing nature into a scale, like the Saffir Simpson scale that we can define, that defines the boundaries of nature. And of course, nature says no. If I want to produce a category 10 hurricane, I will, because I'm a bitch. But I love Mother Nature. And one of the reasons I really love nature is she just flips the middle finger to humans and their funny little cute category intensity scales, like the Saffir Simpson scale. And since Patricia, there have been category 6 and category 7 hurricanes in the Pacific. They call them cyclones if they're in the Pacific, not hurricanes. So we're already over the Saffir Simpson scale. It's 1971, warp ahead 50 years, add in intense global warming, a huge amount of carbon dioxide emissions, a completely destabilized weather system. And basically, we've created and are now living on an alien planet. I don't know why I'm laughing, but that's how I deal with it.